Good Tuesday morning and welcome back to Kibbley Kids Cozy Corner. Thanks again for tuning in. This is Miss Kibbley and oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I didn't have that 15-minute time slot adjusted very well, but it's kind of nice to have a little cliffhanger when we're finishing the story. So if you remember, Matilda gets home and her parents are frantically packing and her dad's telling her pack up and she's running back to Miss Honey's house and she's just out of breath and telling her, Miss Honey, what's going on. So I'm going to read the last paragraph before we continue where we left off. So Miss Honey was telling her, remember, that she was not surprised that they were packing up. And she says, well, because of your father, Miss Honey said, is in with a bunch of crooks. Everyone in the village knows that. My guess is that he is the receiver of stolen cars from all over the country, and he's in it deep. Matilda stared and open-mouthed. Miss Honey went on, people brought stolen cars to your father's workshop where he changed the number and the plates, resprayed the bodies to a different color, and all the rest of it. And now somebody's probably tipped him off that the police are onto him, and he's doing what they all do, running off to Spain where they can't get him. Remember, they live in England. He'll have been spending his money out there for years, all ready and waiting for him. They were standing on the lawn in the front of the lovely red brick house with the weathered old red tiles in its tall chimneys, and Miss Honey still had the pair of garden clippers in one hand. It was a warm golden evening with a blackbird singing somewhere nearby. I don't want to go with them, Matilda shouted. I don't want to go. Well, I'm afraid you must, Miss Honey said. I want to live here with you, Matilda cried out. Please, please let me live here with you. Oh, I only wish I could, Miss Honey said, but I'm afraid it's not possible. You cannot leave your parents just because you want to. They have the right to take them with you, or take you with them. But what if they agreed, Matilda said eagerly. What if they said, yes, I can stay with you. Would you let me stay with you then? Miss Honey softly said, yes, that would be heaven. Well, I think they might, Matilda cried. I honestly think they might. They don't actually care one tuppence about me. Not so fast, Miss Honey said. We've got to be fast, Matilda cried. They're leaving at any moment. Come on, come on, she shouted, grasping Miss Honey's hand. Please come with me and ask them. But we'll have to hurry. We have to run. The next moment, the two of them were running down the drive together and then out to the road, and Matilda was ahead, pulling Miss Honey after by the wrist, and it was a wild and wonderful dash they made along the countryside lane. And through the village to where Matilda's parents lived. The big black Mercedes was still outside, and now its boot and all its doors were open. The boot is the trunk. And Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood and the brother were scurrying around it like ants piling in the suitcases as Matilda and Miss Honey came dashing up. Daddy, Mommy? Matilda burst out, gasping for breath. I don't want to go with you. I want to stay here and live with Miss Honey, and she says that I can, but only if you give her my permission. Please say yes. Go on, Daddy. Say yes, Mommy. The father turned and looked at Miss Honey. You're that teacher woman who once came here to see me, aren't you? He said. Then he went back to stowing suitcases in the car. His wife said to him, this one will have to go in the back seat. There's no more room in the boot. I would love to have Matilda, Miss Honey said. I would look after her with loving care, Mr. Wormwood. I would pay for everything. She wouldn't cost you a penny. But it was not my idea. It was Matilda's, and I will not agree to take her without your full and willing consent. Come on, Harry, the mother said, pushing the suitcase in the back seat. Why don't we let her go if that's what she wants? It'll be one less to look after. See how they're frantically panicking. And he says, I've got a plane to catch. If she wants to stay, let her stay. It's fine with me. Matilda leapt into Miss Honey's arms and hugged her, and Miss Honey hugged her back. And then the mother and father and brother were inside the car, and the car was pulling away with the tires screaming. The brother gave a wave through the rear window, but the other two didn't even look back. Miss Honey was still hugging the tiny girl in her arms, and neither of them said a word as they stood there watching the big black car tearing around the corner, the end of the road, and disappearing in the distance. Yay. And in the back of this book, it gives you more information about the author, which I had read some of that information to you at the beginning when I started this. So that is Matilda, and yet again, we have horrible adults. We thought her parents were bad, and then we ran into the Trunchbull, and oh my gosh, all the things the Trunchbull did to the kids, but also to Miss Honey when she was a kid. So just kind of amazing, and I just like these stories of encouragement because it's just a way to find things that are positive in these difficult times, and the kids conquer the most horrible circumstances. So hang in there, kiddos, and keep working hard. I know this is a difficult time for us all, and kind of difficult to push through. If you're having some struggles, start to go on the internet and find some books that are maybe through YouTube, kind of like what Miss Ghibli's doing, maybe different genres. If you're going, okay, I'm kind of done with Roald Dahl, I'm going to stick with him because that's what I brought home from school, because I didn't know how long I would be doing this when I first started it. I didn't realize it would go all the way to the end of the school year. So I'm actually going to start right now with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But I'm only going to read a couple minutes of it probably by the time I get done talking to you, because I also want to tell you that what most of you are familiar with, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But what a lot of you might not be familiar with is part 2, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. So I know I won't get to this one, but Peter J. Shields, kiddos, this is actually one of our library books. My Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, one of them I couldn't find, and the other one was in worse shape than Matilda, so I just asked Mr. Bosky if I could borrow these. So Mrs. Bowling, if you're watching, I have these. They'll get back to the library. But these are actually from our library, so they're books that you can check out and read for yourselves. And my challenge always with the kiddos is we have 2 movies for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. One is the 1970s version, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, with Gene Wilder playing Willy Wonka, and one is a 2000-something, maybe 90s, but I think it's 2000 with Johnny Depp. I personally like the first one better, except for the Chocolate River, because technology makes the Chocolate River look way better and way yummier in the newer one. But I feel like it's more accurate. There's one scene that is different from the book in the original one from the 70s because of technology again. So there's a chapter in here that we'll read about the nut room. And in the 1970s version, it's golden eggs are in there instead of the nut room, because again, it goes to technology. And before I forget, there's a great Matilda movie. So I always like to read the stories first and then go back and see movies. And I always see the parts that the movies left out. I see the parts that are good, that are bad. I'm trying to think, the Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events. I remember when Tyler was reading those when he was a kid. He absolutely loved those stories. So that might be a group of stories to check out. It's a great series. And he was so disappointed when the movie came out because it was just one movie. And it just switched the order of things and just messed up things. So Tyler was not happy with that. And I do know there's a couple of creatures in this one that are mentioned that are actually in the first mention of the first Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from the 1970s. I think it was 72, but I didn't look it up before I started filming. So without further ado, let us start. I've got about 7 minutes to read. So we'll see how far we get. And we will check out the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. This one has 30 chapters, but about the same thickness. I don't know if the font's exactly the same, but this one has 30 chapters. And I just really like this story. So it starts off. There are 5 children in this book. Augustus Galoop, a greedy boy. Veruca Salt, a girl who is spoiled by her parents. Violet Beauregard, a girl who chews gum all day long. Mike TV, a boy who does nothing but watch television. And Charlie Bucket, the hero. So again, in this one, that's slightly different is the kid who struggles the most, the hero, is the winner in the end again. But it's a little different because some of his obstacles are his peers, the kids that are the same age as him. So this is where it's a little different than some of his other books. But still, chapter 1. Here comes Charlie. These 2 very old people are the father and mother of Mr. Bucket. Their names are Grandpa Joe and Grandma Josephine. And these 2 very old people are the father and mother of Mrs. Bucket. Their names are Grandpa George and Grandma Georgina. This is Mr. Bucket. This is Mrs. Bucket. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket have a small boy whose name is Charlie. This is Charlie. How do you do? And how do you do? And how do you do again? He is pleased to meet you. The whole of his family, the 6 grown-ups, count them, and little Charlie Bucket all lived together in a small wooden house at the edge of a great town. This house wasn't nearly large enough for so many people, and life was extremely uncomfortable for them all. There were only 2 rooms in this place altogether, and there was only 1 bed. The bed was given to the 4 old grandparents because they were so old and tired. They were so tired, they never got out of it. Grandpa Joe and Grandma Josephine on this side, and Grandma George and Grandma Georgina on this side. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket and little Charlie Bucket slept in the other room upon a mattress on the floor. In the summertime, this wasn't too bad, but in the winter, freezing cold drafts blew across the floor all night long, and it was awful. There wasn't any question of them being able to buy a better house or even 1 more bed to sleep in. They were far too poor for that. In the summertime, whoops, I read that already, sorry. Mr. Bucket was the only person in the family with a job. He worked at the toothpaste factory, where he sat all day long at a bench and screwed little caps on the tops of toothpaste tubes after the tubes had been filled. But a toothpaste cap screwer is never paid very much money, and poor Mr. Bucket, however hard he worked and however fast he screwed on the caps, was never able to make enough to buy 1/2 of the things that so large a family needed. There wasn't even enough money to buy proper food for them all. The only meals they could afford were bread and margarine for breakfast, boiled potatoes and cabbage for lunch, and cabbage soup for supper. Sundays, though, were a bit better. They all looked forward to Sundays because then, although they had exactly the same thing, everyone was allowed a second helping. The Buckets, of course, didn't starve, but every one of them, the 2 grandfathers, the 2 grandmothers, Charlie's father, Charlie's mother, and especially little Charlie himself, went about from morning till night with a horrible empty feeling in their tummies. Charlie felt it worst of all. Although his father and mother often went without their own share of lunch or supper so that they could give it to him, it still wasn't nearly enough for growing boy. He desperately wanted something more filling and satisfying than cabbage and cabbage soup. The one thing he longed for more than anything else was chocolate. Walking to school in the mornings, Charlie could see great slabs of chocolate piled high in the shop windows, where he would stop and stare and press his nose against the glass, his mouth watering like mad. Many times a day, he would see other children carrying creamy candy bars out of their pockets and munching on them greedily. And that, of course, was pure torture. Once a year on his birthday, did Charlie ever get to taste a bit of chocolate. The whole family saved up their money for that special occasion, and when the great day arrived, Charlie was always presented with 1 small chocolate bar to eat, all by himself. And each time he received it on those marvelous birthday mornings, he would place it carefully in a small wooden box that he owned and treasure it as though it were a bar of solid gold. And for the next few days, he would allow himself only to look at it, but never to touch it. Then at last, he could stand it no longer. He would peel back a tiny bit of the paper wrapping at one corner just to expose a tiny bit of chocolate. And then he would take a tiny nibble, just enough to allow the lovely sweet taste to spread all over his tongue. The next day, he would take another tiny nibble, and so on. And this was the way Charlie would make his 10-cent bar of birthday chocolate last him for a month. So a 10-cent bar would be like a regular-sized candy bar today. But I haven't yet told you the one awful thing that tortured little Charlie, the lover of chocolate more than anything else. The thing for him was far, far worse than seeing slabs of chocolate in the shop windows or watching their other children munching on creamy candy bars right in front of him. It was the most terrible torture anyone could imagine. The town itself was actually within sight of the house which Charlie lived. There was an enormous chocolate factory. Remember that chocolate factory we mentioned in James and the Giant Peach? There it is. Just imagine that. And it wasn't simply an ordinary, enormous chocolate factory either. It was the largest, most fabulous in the whole world. It was Wonka's factory, owned by a man called Mr. Willy Wonka, the greatest inventor and maker of chocolates that had ever been. And there was a tremendous, marvelous place it was. It had huge iron gates leading to it, and a high wall surrounding it, and smoke belching from its chimneys, and a straight whizzing sounds coming from deep inside it. And outside the walls, for half a mile around in every direction, the air was scented with the heavy, rich smell of melting chocolate. Twice a day, on his way to and from school, little Charlie Bucket had to walk right past the gates of the factory, and every time he went in, he would begin to walk very slowly, and he would hold his nose high in the air and take long sniffs of this chocolatey smell around him. Oh, how he loved that smell. And oh, he wished he could go inside that chocolate factory. That's chapter 1. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.